Hey guys, welcome to the daily analysis for today, which is Tuesday, November 27th. And yesterday we talked about the euro being at some key levels, and so we're going to follow up with that today, touch some of those pairs again, and then also talk about a few pairs that we didn't get to mention yesterday, like the USD-CAD, for instance. So we're going to get into all of that, but before we get into all that, let's take a look at our news to see what some of the major events going on tomorrow are and how they can affect the things that we're talking about today. Alright guys, so the news as far as tomorrow's concerned is pretty light up until 10 a.m. where there's some US dollar news. That's new home sales, and of course home sales is a pretty good indicator of how the economy is doing. So that's always worth paying attention to if you're someone who's concerned about those fundamental signs. And then there is a chairman speech. It's not Bernanke, but there is a chairman speaking tomorrow, so you want to pay attention to that. It's not always as important when it's not the U.S. dollar, when it's not Bernanke, but still, just like in the U.S., when the chairman speaks, people tend to listen. It tends to make the markets react. So that's Swiss news at 12:15 p.m. And then later on, we have New Zealand and odd news, which is also pretty big announcements. Business confidence for New Zealand, and then private capital expenditure for odd. Okay, so those are the four red tagged events that I just went over. Again, those are home sales in the U.S., chairman speaking for Swiss, the New Zealand business confidence, and then private capital expenditure for the Australian dollar. Okay, four red tagged events tomorrow. Nothing going on until 10 a.m. Eastern. But when those events register, you're gonna want to keep an eye on your charts, especially, of course, if you have any of those currencies shown in your open positions. Okay. Okay, and quickly, these are our terms, which basically say that we're not licensed or qualified to provide investment advice, and that anything we say here is purely for your educational purpose and not intended to tell you how to risk your own money. Alright, if you need to pause it and read through those, please do. I'm going to go ahead and get into our charts now. Alright guys, so again, the first thing I'm going to show you here is the euro-dollar daily chart. And as we mentioned, the euro-dollar is, kind of struggling up right at that 130 area, which is not surprising. It's struggled there a lot of times before. Today it made some bearish progress. You can see an early tail pushing up through the 130 area, and then and moving downward off that level, coming back towards this area, which, as we can see, is a pretty strong level, been tested many times. Recently broken through, of course, but that doesn't mean that it won't be respected on the way back down. So a pretty good target here if you're thinking short on the euro dollar. But again, just a nice pierce and finally starting to make some kind of bearish movement. Obviously, since we built this base here, it really hasn't made any progress in the downward direction, but we're off a previous major area of resistance and a relatively good candle piercing through and making some movement down. So again, I would look for it for price to come down to the 128.40 area, and once it gets down to there, then we'd of course look for the next break or bounce depending on what happens after that. So again, 128.40 is kind of the area that I'm looking at, and if price does move toward that area, we'll talk about the potential breaking of that area, the potential bouncing from that area to a new high. A lot more possibilities open up, but it all depends on if that bearish movement follows through. So that's what we're waiting for, or at least that's what I'm waiting for on the euro dollar right now. Okay, let's check the pound dollar as well. All right, with the pound dollar, we do have this this trend line, kind of a long-term wedge forming here that has been respected. It kind of began, if you count this as the first test, in the beginning of June of 2012, still respecting this overall wedge. If we remember, there was a kind of a mini wedge within this wedge that I'm drawing here, where price broke up. But after this long break and this very steep movement to the upside for the pound, we eventually peaked and started moving down on this trend line, which has been respected ever since. So again, we're getting a balance near this trend line, looking to push back down, and we'll look for price to head back off this area once again. Now, if you notice, since this has moved down, we've made lower lows here, here, and now here. So for pound to break, or excuse me, for pound to make another low, or a lower low, I should say, it would have to break through this trend line very convincingly and come all the way down towards this area to make a lower low. So that is a potential. If we get some bearish momentum, obviously not very much momentum right now, just a very small bar. But if we do get some momentum, look for a break of this area and a continuation down to our next zone, which is around the 157.60 area in that ballpark. So a lot of potential for the pound. We expect a breakout pretty soon as it tightens up within this range. If it does continue to respect this, eventually we'll get pretty tight here and look for a breakout of the end, which could be another great signal. So either way, we're going to get a good signal from the pound pretty soon, just a matter of time, matter of waiting, and I look forward to taking advantage of it when that does occur. Okay, I mentioned we're going to go over the USDCAD, so I want to show you that now. Alright guys, so I have this trend line on my US dollar Canadian chart now. I did have a downward trend line if I take a longer look back, which was broken when this started going up. But I just want to show you this closer view because what I want to call your attention to is obviously the current bounce of this trend line. And again, it's not a super long-term trend line. It's about 2 months or so. But we are getting a nice test and a candle that looks to be piercing and staying up above this trend line. Now, right now, there's not a lot of bullish momentum or bullish follow-through, but if we get some continuation, this could be a great long setup, assuming that we're headed towards higher highs, up perhaps towards the 101.50 area, which is a very nice target. So keep an eye on this USD CAD. We have a bounce right here off the trend line, which also respects former support. A lot of support clustered in, and all we need is some bullish momentum to take this thing up, and we could be in for a very nice trade. So certainly keep the USD CAD. Keep your eye on that for a nice long position. Okay, next I want to show you the Euro Pound, which is another one that's at a critical level. You can see that I actually have an entry on here. This is just a demo account that I use for these charts, but I just happen to take the trade on my demo account for the fun of it. But you can see that we're right off this trend line. We have triple tops here, and we did get some bearish movement heading down. Now, it's right at this area right now. That's a pretty bad line, but right at this area. That's not a major area or anything, but don't be surprised if price struggles there for a minute. As a matter of fact, it already has struggled there, so I'm not concerned about this little top here. But I did just want to call it to your attention. Now, you can see that on my little demo account, I put my target right here at this previous low before it moved up, and that is a sensible target in my opinion. It's before the next major area, so I'm trying to protect myself, and in case price gets and bounces right off there before it gets to the next level, I would still get out with profit. And also, I'm considering this top as the start of a trend. Obviously this is not a trend yet, but I'm considering this a trend, which means that I would expect price to continue bouncing and making lower lows, which this is our previous low, so that always is a sensible target if you're taking a short. So that's what I have set up there. Again, I just think that the Euro Pound has made it clear that it's not looking to make higher highs and continue this uptrend. So because that's the case, bounces in the bearish direction to me are good setups, and that's what we have here. So keep an eye on that one. It's the Euro Pound, and again, one thing I like about the Euro Pound is even though it doesn't move a lot, when it makes up its mind about which direction it's going, it tends to be consistent because the euro and the pound are very similar currencies. So because they're similar, it's not likely that you have these massive changes and reversals constantly because they pretty much run together. So if they run together and one is slightly stronger than the other, you get these long, slow trends, which is what I like. And hopefully, this short can be the start of the right side of a bearish trend, which is the goal there. Okay, so that's the Euro Pound. I think that trend line is still valid even though it's broken. I think that there's a lot of bearish potential there. It's all a matter of follow through at this point. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at the Pound New Zealand. Alright, again, I just want to show you a pretty up close, quick view of the Pound New Zealand as I'm tracking this downward trend line. There's a nice little base up here, kind of pushing price up, and so we kind of are forming another one of those wedges that I always point out. Looks like price should come up 50, 60 more pips before it gets to this area. So keep an eye on that. But be prepared for this breakout because we're getting awfully close on the Pound New Zealand. Make sure that you're aware of that as you're trading. All right, and I actually think that's the last pair that I wanted to cover. Just wanted to draw your attention to a few of those major things. Keep an eye again on that USD CAD trend line, that Euro Pound bearish break, the Euro Dollar bearish movement, and the Pound Dollar approaching that trend line, or even bouncing off the trend line now, depending on how you draw that. A lot of things, a lot of major levels in play right now that we're expecting follow through on or breaks on, obviously depending on what price decides to do. So a lot of stuff going on, should present a lot of good opportunities as we follow through it this week. And I just want to make sure that you guys are prepared and ready for those. And I hope that you take advantage of many of them. All right, guys, thanks again for watching the analysis, and I'll talk to you soon.